Go for it.
I'll go for it. It's 6:30, so we'll start. Just start with the routine bits. First of all, the fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Okay. I haven't said that this is a meeting of the Licensing Committee of Basingstoke and Dean. Next, to note that the open proceedings of this meeting are webcast, and I'll check that the webcast is switched on. Yes, thank you. Can I ask you to switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent, please? Thank you. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Jones. No others? We have no resignations and replacements. Are there any conflicts of interest? No? No. I have no urgent items. So just to confirm next that the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November last year are accurate. They can be found at paper A. I wasn't there, so I'm relying on you to say. Are we in agreement? You're reading them for the first time. Agreed?
I think so, because I was there.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. That's for Rita to sign. We have no member or public participation upon issues contained within the agenda, but I would like to welcome Colin Rowland, who's come to view our committee meeting. He is the new Head of Street Scene, Parks and Regulatory Services. So welcome, and I'm sure people will introduce themselves at the end of the meeting. Thank you. We've only got 2 items to consider this evening. Linda, do you just want to make a comment on the fees and charges, which is deferred? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. You will be aware from the November committee it was agreed we would be bringing the fees and charges report to this committee following the time recording exercise and the calculations. The calculations have thrown up a few anomalies which we're not happy with. We think it's possibly something to do with the formatting of the time recording spreadsheets when we've merged them, or something to do with the formula. So we are currently undertaking a little bit more just to be sure, because some of the fees were likely to go up by 75% and some down by 60%, and we just weren't happy that we should impose those without 3 times checking. So we're going through that process at the moment, and we will definitely be bringing the paper to the next committee for consideration. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks very much. And hopefully when we've got that model, it can be used year on year to get accurate fees and charges. Okay, so the first of our items is approval of stage 1 of the Statement of Principles under the Gambling Act 2005, following the consultation process which took place between the last meeting and this one. And the draft statement is to be found at page 23. Linda, are you going to introduce it? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening again. You'll remember that the committee meeting in November we brought to you a draft revised statement of licensing policy under the Gambling Act for approval for consultation purposes. Members will be aware that we have to review the statement of licensing principles every 3 years, and last year the Gambling Commission decided to bring out some new requirements in respect of local area profiling and risk assessments for operators. And local authorities are expected to have something in their policy around that sort of thing, looking at vulnerable persons, premises nearby where people could be affected by gambling activities. Unfortunately, the guidance didn't come out till October, so we haven't, before the November committee meeting, we weren't able to put that information in, and like a lot of authorities, we're doing this in 2 stages. The stage 1 review is what's in front of you this evening. It was approved for consultation in November and was consulted on during December. You'll see from the report we only had 2 responses, one from Goschalk Solicitors and one from, whose name's I've forgotten, Appendix 2. Corals, I'm sorry. We've taken the view that the response from Corals is really more in relation to the local area profiling stuff, which we haven't quite completed. We're 95% of the way there now. So I've included it in the report, but suggested that we will consider the detail of this more in line with the local area profiling, which is what we're doing. The response from Goshchalks was very interesting and made some very valid points, and you'll see from the appendix what we've agreed with. I've put at the end of the relevant paragraph, and we've amended the policy to reflect those views because we think there were some very useful points. It has been pointed out that a couple of areas in the policy still say promoting the licensing objectives rather than having regard to. I will amend those before this goes up to full council, because under the Gambling Act, the licensing authority must have regard to the licensing objectives. Under the Licensing Act 2003, it is for the promotion of the licensing objectives. So there's a little bit of an error with terminology there. So that will be amended prior to this going up to full council, subject to it being approved tonight. I was surprised we only got 2 responses, but I think we've done the same thing at heart, and the response has been very similar, so perhaps the response levels are quite low nationally. I would expect to see a greater response rate when we do include the local area profiling and risk assessments. So I'm really requesting that tonight that you approve this for us to refer up to full council for adoption as of the 1st of April, because the full council is on the 31st of March. If you've got any technical questions, I've brought Sheila along, who's my gambling expert within the team. Thank you very much.
Could I just say that you mentioned that in 1 or 2 places it still sounds a bit like the Licensing Act 2003. I've identified 4 places where it needs to be re-amended. Are you happy for me to feed that straight through, or do you want me to go through them now? You're happy for me to just feed them straight through? Okay. The only other thing I just wanted to check was that you said that you'd amended paragraph 19. Have you done that? Because I don't know what the original one said. That's to do with planning.
Yes, that has been changed. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any comments, questions? Yes, Councillor Raphael.
I noticed, if I remember correctly, that one of the concerns by the solicitors was that the policy raised the concern of gambling premises being close to schools, and wonder whether that was something that we should be anxious about or not, if I understood it correctly. Can you help me with this? Are we able to impose conditions on gambling licenses if they were close to a school, where they'd have to have proof of ID or an over 21s policy or something like that?
Got it. The gambling premises are very heavily regulated by the Gambling Commission, and no person over the age of 18 can enter a gambling premises, but a lot of them operate, I think, 21, with regards to those persons who... Sorry, you said nobody over the age of 18? Sorry, under the age of 18 can enter a premises. With regards to schools being close, the Gambling Commission in their guidance have suggested that we should include schools in the policy, and we have done. I think the thinking is that school children are that young that they would be highly visible if they entered a premises, which will only allow persons over the age of 18 anyway. We recently had an application from William Hill, which I'm sure you're all aware of, with concerns as the premises was opposite an ice cream parlour. The Gambling Commission have stipulated some very heavy conditions that are default and mandatory. We are able to add conditions, but they have to be reasonable and must not double up on the Gambling Commission conditions that the operator licenses have to abide by. So the type of conditions could be that there are 2 persons on the site during the school hours. We could impose those conditions, but it would have to be evidence-based.
Any other questions or comments? While we're on the subject, therefore, of the betting shop that's recently appeared in the top of town, I wondered if we could, as a committee, and I've opened this up to discussion, request the portfolio holder to write to the government, adding our voice to the many councils that have asked if in legislation on gambling they can add cumulative impact of betting shops as something that can be taken into consideration. As you know, at the moment we really have no reason to refuse any betting shops at the moment. William Hill was refused in planning but won its appeal. So really I just throw that open. Would you be happy as a committee to agree to request the portfolio holder to write to the government and add our voice for that? Is everyone agreed? Yes, Councillor Godison.
Well, I certainly agree. Am I not right? I thought William Hill had been approved by, well, our planning department recommended approval, and then it was refused and went to the inspector. But that's just my memory of what happened, and I would like to suggest that the portfolio holder also writes to the planning department and makes them aware of the fact that in view of the plans to improve the top of town, we would not wish them to approve or recommend approval for any more facilities of that nature. Thank you.
Well, I should think that's one for the portfolio holder sitting next to you rather than Terry. It's a planning issue.
I was just going to say I don't want to write to the government, but I'm not going to.
I think in this committee, I think as with the licensing committee, we can probably only deal with the licensing aspect of it here, which is a little bit more clear-cut, I think. We did approve William Hill because we had no choice but to, but obviously there is quite a I can never say that word, a lot of betting shops, not only in our town, but in many towns, and there's quite a lot of a kick against it with councils. So if you're agreed, then we'll ask the relevant portfolio holder to write to the government and ask them to bring in cumulative impact legislation. Okay? Thank you. Agreed. Thank you. Are we also then agreed to approve this first stage of the statement of principles? Yes, and that will come to the next council meeting. Thank you. Right.
Sorry,
yes.
Who's proposing that and who's seconding it before we all agree?
We want to do it formally. Okay. Can I have a proposer for the approval? Councillor Godison. Seconded. Oh, okay. Seconded by Councillor Burgess. Everyone in agreement? Yes? Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy. Now we'll move on to the other item on our agenda, which is to review and approve the fees policy in respect of mobile homes licensing. Could the officer please introduce it, whichever one it is? Oh, yes, sorry, not the officer. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Just very briefly, it's a very short report, and the report seeks approval of Licensing Committee for the mobile homes fees policy. The policy itself is attached to the report. This is in response to the Mobile Homes Act of 2013, which was enacted 1st of April 2014, which gives new enforcement and administrative powers to local authorities in respect of mobile home sites. So we have the fees policy attached for your information. Just a few very quick points. Having the mobile homes fees policy in place, I think, is an incentive to actually run a good site. The proposal is that we would have a risk register, and that those sites that were deemed to be at low risk would only be inspected every 3 years, so consequently would have a lower fee to actually pay. So it's a way of ensuring that the sites are good and that those people who live there are well protected and looked after. We believe that virtually all the sites that we have currently in the borough are good anyway and would fall into the low risk register, so we're not talking about a huge amount of money here. Just a small amount of money for inspection, and that on most of them would be every 3 years only if they're on the low risk register. And we have, of the mobile home sites that we have in the borough, there are only, I'm just looking at my list, only I believe 6 of them which would actually fall into the inspection category, because the rest of them do not have enough pictures there. So again, it's just six sites that will be subject to these inspections and these fees. So we're seeking your approval for that. If anyone has any technical questions, Darren, the officer, is here also, and he's very kindly offered to answer any questions. But other than that, I think that's probably all I want to say, and I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Councillor Frankham.
Just a quick one. In the conclusion, it says that our fees compare favourably. In other papers, we normally get the comparison table. The work's obviously been done to be able to know that. So I would wonder if you could circulate it afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of these fees policies are now quite mature. We're quite late coming to the party with this, so we've had the chance to review quite a few policies and fees and charges from other authorities, and our fees are definitely commensurate with those. So if you want some comparisons, I'm happy to supply them to you.
Any more questions at this stage? No? For either Councillor Reid or Darren? Any comments? No? Is everyone happy with it? Well, this is going to be a nice short meeting, if you're sure. Oh, I normally expect more questions from some of you. Yes, Councillor Raphael.
Could you just say how big the site's got to be to attract all of this?
We're proposing 6 or more. That's recommendation from DCLG.
Yes, Terry.
If you have a look at page 66, item 4, it has fee exemptions, so it lists a number of exemptions there. So as Darren says, sites with 5 units or fewer, but there are a few other exceptions as well, including Gypsy, Roma and Travellers sites.
Okay, it seems we're all happy with this. Is that okay with everyone? Right, would you like us to do it formally? Yes. Could I have a proposer to approve, please? Yes, Councillor Regan, and a seconder, Councillor Burgess. All in favour? That's approved. Thank you very much. Well, all it remains for me to do is to look at matters dealt with subcommittees since our last meeting. I don't know if you've got any comments. Obviously, one of them was cancelled. There were 2 taxi drivers who were going to have their licence refused or revoked, and they were appealing against it. I believe they were both upheld. One, yes, and one is appealing to the Magistrates' Court against our decision to not renew his licence. The betting premises licence we've already mentioned was approved. B&M Retail had their licence suspended for 2 months. And that's it. Okay, I think in light of no more business, I declare this meeting closed. It's a record.